And now we have quite a few people who have joined. Those who have just joined us, thank you for joining us, and please introduce yourselves in the chat. We'd like to know where everyone is tuning in from. I see a lot of people from India, South Africa, Kenya. It's really nice to see a diverse group of attendees. And now I'd like to officially start this webinar. I'd like to go over the agenda. So we're going to start with an introduction. We'll get into a conversation on the context of ESG, followed by ESG and business, and then ESG frameworks and case studies. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. And I'd like to request all of you to post your questions in the Q&A tab and not the regular chat. This just makes it easier for us to combine any questions that are similar. And at the end of the webinar, we can have a very productive discussion. And first, I'd like to introduce our first panelist who will be joining us for the welcome message, Zahir Sheikh. He's the partner of Risk Advisory, Internal Audit and Forensic Services of BDO East Africa offices in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. He's a dynamic leader with a high public profile and has been a market leader in his chosen markets and services. He was a regional partner responsible for financial advisory services in KPMG in Eastern Africa, working primarily in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Zahir has over 30 years of experience, 7 years in the UK, and 24 years of professional experience gained at KPMG in Africa. He established the first forensic practice in Kenya in the year 2000 and grew it to a team of 25 full-time forensic specialists in the Eastern African region. As a regional partner of the Forensic Service Business Unit, Zahir has been involved in managing large and complex investigations, designing internal control systems, providing proactive fraud management services, and much more. Our next panelist is Dipankar Ghosh. He leads the sustainability and ESG services in BDO in India. His professional career spanning 3.5 decades focuses on leading solutions and teams around subject matter of sustainability and human development, climate change, ESG, resource efficiency, sustainable technology, renewable energy, and climate financing. He has supported corporates, government, multilateral and bilateral agencies, as well as not-for-profits. He has worked across diverse geographies and clients covering diverse industry sectors such as metallurgy and mining, power and utility, oil and gas, chemicals and fertilizers, cement, pulp and paper, and much more. Dipankar's experience includes initial long stints with engineering consultancy, subsequently leading sustainability practice as a partner at large professional services firm in India, and later in MENA, entrepreneurial venture in creating a sustainable development advisory firm before joining BDO. Thank you for joining us here, Dipankar Ghosh. And now I'd like to introduce Prateek Sengupta. He's a director in sustainability and ESG team of business advisory services at BDO in India. He has 12 years of professional experiences in the domain of sustainability, ESG, and climate change. Prior to joining BDO, he had worked primarily in the space of ESG, sustainability, and climate change consulting with global firms. He was also heading ESG and sustainability for a leading airline company in India. He has supported several leading Indian and global companies in designing their ESG and sustainability strategy, preparing their non-financial disclosures, leading non-financial assurance engagements, and providing training and awareness generation on corporate ESG and sustainability. He has also worked extensively with donor agencies like UNDP, GIZ, and World Bank in developing climate strategies and securing climate financing for several states in India. He also helped build the ESG and sustainability team at a leading Indian airline company from the ground up. As you can see, we are joined by a lot of experts from India, and through this 4-part series is designed to guide you through the entire spectrum of the ESG practices. I'd now like to hand it over to Zahir to kick off this webinar and provide us with a welcome message.
Thanks so much, Meha, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. I'm really excited to be here today. This is a topic that's very close to our heart. We're actually doing our own matrix at the moment, to try and get SBTi accreditation for BDO East Africa. So this is very close to my heart. As usual, I'll talk a little bit about BDO. I'll talk about BDO services, and then I'll introduce the 4-part series that is not to be missed. So guys, I think you're all in for a very good treat. Starting with BDO Global. A lot of you will know BDO. BDO is the 5th largest global professional services provider. We have offices in 166 countries, nearly 1,800 offices worldwide. We have over 115,000 professional staff. And last year, our turnover for the financial year was in excess of 14 billion US dollars. You can see on the right-hand side of this slide, the map. All of the parts that are shaded dark gray is where BDO has a footprint with established offices. So I'm sure Dipankar is going to tell you a little bit about BDO India. I will talk a little bit about BDO East Africa. BDO East Africa is a East African partnership. We have presence in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and now we're opening offices in Burundi, DRC, and we'll also have a large footprint in Somalia. Next slide, Meha. A little bit about our services. So we offer all of the services that you would expect of a global audit, tax, and advisory firm. We provide all of the standard audit services, such as statutory audits of financial statements, audit of donor-funded projects, special purpose audits, internal control audits. We do a lot of training on IFRS, as well as other technical areas. In terms of taxation, we provide tax compliance services, tax advisory services. We provide tax audits and tax health checks. We have experts on transfer pricing, both locally as well as international transfer pricing. We provide advice on employment tax and expatriate tax and corporate international tax planning. We also provide advice on tax, indirect taxes and customs duty. And we also fight cases for corporates in the tribunal where there are large disputes with the revenue authority. And then our third department is business services and outsourcing, where we provide a whole range of outsourced services, such as accounting and bookkeeping, compilation of statutory annual reports, management reporting, financial management agent services, fiscal management services, payroll services, IFRS advisory services, company secretarial services, admin and accounting services, and a whole host of other legal services as well. And then the area that's my home, which is advisory services. I had the advisory services in Kenya. And basically, we provide internal audit, which is co-sourced and also outsourced. So if you want to use BDO to do all of your internal audit, that's what we can do. And usually there's a saving of about 60 to 70% if you're using a firm such as BDO, as opposed to having your own internal audit firm. We also provide a whole range of risk advisory and risk management services, management consulting services, corporate recovery and business turnaround services, corporate finance and transaction advisory services. And in this area, in transaction advisory services, globally, BDO is actually #1. And what I mean by that is we have the highest number of deals annually, more than any other firm globally. And those of us who know how deals are made on the basis of trust. So we have a good reputation of being trustable, and our staff and our partners and our leaders, this is a core value for them. I also had the forensic investigations division. And then we have a technology advisory division. We have a business intelligence division. And finally, we have a sustainability and ESG services division. Next slide, Meha. So let me now turn to what we are going to embark on today. And from the onset, I can tell you I'm really excited to welcome all of you to this comprehensive 4-part webinar series on environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, sustainability practices. As businesses and organizations around the world increasingly recognize the importance of operating responsibly, ESG has become a top priority on strategic agendas. This series is designed not only to deepen your understanding of ESG principles, but also to equip your organization with practical strategies for real-world implementation. In today's fast-paced business environment, incorporating ESG considerations is no longer a choice like it was maybe 10 years ago, but today it's a crucial factor in achieving long-term success. Companies that excel in these areas are experiencing enhanced risk management, improved reputations, stronger customer relationships, and increased appeal to investors. Each session in our series will guide you through the intricacies of ESG, from very basic concepts to advanced strategy and reporting. So join us as we embark on this transformative journey that will reshape the way you approach sustainability and governance, providing you with the tools and insights to lead and innovate responsibly within your own sphere of influence. So starting with today's webinar, which is Demystifying the ESG Process, this webinar aims to provide a clear understanding of ESG principles and their vital role within organizations. We have experts from our BDO Sustainability Services Division, and they are going to guide you through the ESG frameworks, the key metrics, and reporting standards. We will strive to simplify complex concepts, ensuring that all participants grasp the fundamentals of ESG and how to apply them in their daily operations. In our second session, which is our second webinar, scheduled for 22nd of May, our goal will be to help you identify and focus on the ESG issues that matter most to your stakeholders and your business. Our experts will share insights on conducting effective materiality assessments and developing strategies for engaging with stakeholders. This session will aim to empower you to prioritize your sustainability efforts effectively and to ensure that they resonate with those who are most impacted by your operations, obviously your stakeholders. And then in our third webinar, which is Access, Creating an ESG Roadmap, we'll focus on the practical steps to develop a tailored ESG strategy that aligns with your organization's unique needs and goals. Once again, our expert video presenters will provide valuable guidance on assessing your current ESG practices, setting achievable goals, and integrating sustainability into your broader business strategies. This session will equip you with the necessary tools to embark on your sustainability journey with confidence. Now, we initially thought we were going to do a 5-part webinar series, but on later reflection, we've combined the 4th and the 5th webinar into our 4th and final webinar. So this webinar, entitled Report and Measure, Preparing and Submitting Sustainability Reports and Determining ESG Maturity. So here we're going to dive into 2 essential aspects of ESG practices: report and measure. First, our experts will walk you through the process of preparing and submitting sustainability reports. We'll cover everything you need to know, from choosing the right frameworks to navigating the complexities of data collection. You'll learn how to create reports that accurately and transparently showcase your sustainability achievements. We'll also share best practices and tips to help you take your reporting to the next level, ensuring that your efforts make a meaningful impact. And then in that same webinar, the 4th webinar, the second part of this webinar will focus on how to measure and determine your organization's ESG maturity. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. We'll provide you with the tools and the knowledge that you need to assess your current ESG performance, set realistic targets for improvement, and measure the effectiveness of your sustainability initiative. initiatives. Our experts will share proven methodologies and tools that are essential for tracking your progress and ensuring that you're hitting your sustainability goals. By combining reporting as well as measurement, you'll be well equipped to develop long-term strategic plans and continuously improve your ESG efforts. So in conclusion, we at BDO and I in particular, we're really looking forward to guiding you through each one of these webinars because each is designed and built upon the last. As we progress through this series of webinars, we will leave you with a comprehensive toolkit for ESG implementation. Our goal is for you to walk away empowered and enlightened with the knowledge and practices needed to advance your organization's sustainability initiatives. And now it's my pleasure to hand you over to our senior sustainability partner, Dipankar. Dipankar, welcome, and the floor is all yours, my good friend.
Thank you very much, Meha. Thank you very much, Zahir, for putting a nice introduction to this event. And Meha, I am seeking the remote control so that you can hand it over to me. I can so that navigate through the slides. Yes, thank you so much. So I think the stage has been set for a discussion on ESG, and as Zahir very rightly told, that the key of the organizations, how the ESG is evolving today, is that it is not just a regulatory compliance, but also how ESG is gradually and increasingly more and more making a business sense for organization to kind of adopt and getting the business benefits out of it. So if you see the top line, we at BDO strive to help organizations to embark on and achieve business objectives sustainably. So all over the world, there are new regulations coming in, as we all know, which is requiring many organizations to take actions with respect to sustainability, with respect to ESG. But the business benefit out of it is something which is extremely important. And that is where, we come in and we want to kind of make a difference. Now, if you see on the screen, you can see the solutions which we provide to organizations across geographies and across maturity levels. But I draw your attention to the diagram on the right-hand side. If you look at the elements of sustainable development, ESG, climate action, sustainable energy, sustainable healthcare. These are some of the important things in the world that is happening. And our expert team is there to support you in all these areas. And our solutions, if I may draw your attention to the band at the middle, this gray to green band, different organizations, when they start the journey on sustainability and they gradually mature, we have solutions for everyone at the different maturity levels. For example, when any organization starts its journey, what it requires is ESG diagnostic, creating a framework, developing a strategy and a roadmap for themselves. Then get on to different kind of disclosures which the stakeholders want and the regulatory requirements demand. Then, for example, you get into an area where you improve your ESG scores in certain platforms like Dow Jones Sustainability Index, Morgan Stanley Index, and so on and so forth. So, our teams, mature team are there across different geographies to support you on that. And in India, what we have created a center of excellence kind of things, and we help people across different countries like Zahir in East African region to reach out to clients and support their clients in various ESG related initiatives. Then as organizations mature, they require perhaps a little more detailed services related to, for example, climate action, climate risk and vulnerability, climate related reporting, finding out, importance of the financial implication of the climate risk and opportunities. So these are the kind of things organizations then go into. We have solutions around that. Sustainable energy, for example, what kind of how you can get into energy efficiency solution, how we can do the demand side management best, energy strategy, and market access to renewable energy, and so on and so forth. And a very niche area on the right column, if you see, the sustainable healthcare, that's a very specialized team within our organization that helps you, to set up, make public healthcare facilities sustainable, climate resilient, and so on and so forth. So that is broadly, what we are. And if I move on now to the topic, the context of ESG, very well set by Zahir already, but I would like to add a few words. For example, it has got 3 dimensions, social dimension, economic dimension, and environment dimension. And when these, circles intersect, what we see is called sustainability. And this sustainable development, if you look at the top, the definition mostly accepted, which was created in 1987, way back in 1987, sustainable development is the development which meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, which means that whatever action we take, we should preserve the environment, and this earth will leave our earth to the future generation so that it meets their needs and expectations. And we are seeing all over the world the challenges around that. Moving on to the right side of the diagram, this is the more modern definition, I would say, of sustainability, where the economic benefit is actually at the center, and which is supported by, social activities, environmental activities, but eventually for an organization, it has to be economic benefit, and the organization exists for the purpose of having profit, and that you cannot deny. The organization has to have profit, but how effectively we have the environmental action, our social actions that support the economic activity, that is actually something is extremely important, and that is what the crux of the sustainable development as it is defined in modern times. Yeah, sorry. Moving on, there are 3 pillars of sustainability which we often talk about: the economic performance, environmental performance, and social performance, and all 3 of them standing on a solid ground of what you call governance. That is actually what sustainability eventually brings sustainability in any organization. And these 3 pillars often also referred to as people, planet, and profit. People referring to the social performance, planet referring to the environmental performance, and profit to the economic performance, right? And we also often see the word ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And the elements of that we see in the next slide, if we come into the components of environmental, the components of social, and the components of governance. You can read. I am not going to read out each and every one from this particular slide, but you can see the environmental components are talking about energy efficiency, they're talking about climate change, which is one of the major concern all over the world, which is causing so much of kind of irregular weather events and so on and so forth all over the world. I think recently the news which our attention was drawn into was the huge massive rainfall in Middle East region, in Dubai and adjoining region, and kind of bringing activities to a halt, right? Air pollution, water pollution, deforestation. I know we all are kind of experiencing it today. So, and in the social front, organizations work within an area where, there are so many important topics: that how you are respecting human rights, how you are ensuring, business is free from child labor, whether, labor standards are being incorporated, the corporate social responsibility, our responsibility for the businesses to act, responsibly in terms of environmental and social actions, how we are doing on that, gender balance, gender, kind of responsibility, and all those kind of things. And governance is something which is the bedrock, which needs to actually be prevailing to have our environmental and social actions in the right manner. At the bottom, what you see over the years, there has been a lot of principles, guiding principles that have kind of come on. So, for example, the principle of responsible investment, the UNGC, United Nations Global Compact Framework, GRI guideline, and so on and so forth. There are frameworks, which is GRI guideline, for example, one of the oldest one, which talks about how you can address the different components of sustainability. What are the key performance indicators on sustainability? CDP, for example, for many, many years has been kind of talking about how in the water front, in the emission front, the GHG emission, that is the carbon emission front, you can have the leading practices and so on and so forth. And on the third category, there are investors and regulators who are asking for different kind of implementation from the organizations, and those are in the third block, as you can kind of see. So why this sustainability and ESG matters? As I was talking at the beginning itself, it is one is, of course, the regulatory matters. Regulations are requiring organizations to follow certain ESG or sustainability related standards. But the other one is, that overall the world is aiming towards achieving UN Sustainable Development Goals, as we all know, which has been taken up in 2015. And by 2030, across the 17 indicators of UN SDG, the nations across the world are expected to achieve the targets that has been taken up through the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And an estimate says that that there is about 6 trillion opportunity to finance these activities related to sustainable development goals, which the world requiring to achieve. There are huge investment opportunities. We are talking of the climate related issues and net zero transition to cleaner economy. Emission-free economy is something the world is prioritizing, because we know that if we keep on doing emissions at the pace as we have been doing in the past century, it's going to be disaster, and disaster as indications have already started coming, as you see. So there are estimates which says that at least 4 trillion US 4 trillion is required to be spent on low carbon transition related activities between 2030 to 2050, if you want to retain the level of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere and arrest it at that level. And we all know about the fourth industrial revolution, which we are undergoing, which means, we are talking about, rapid advancement in the area of, technology, Internet of Things, machine learning, and now, artificial intelligence. So a huge investment is going to happen in that area. And that is so much related to the actions related to sustainability and ESG in terms of, weather forecasting, in terms of, modeling that requires the actions which are to be prioritized for preserving the, the Earth's current situation. So this huge opportunity actually clearly says that, sustainability and ESG is something where we need to keep on having higher investments, and everybody needs to be kind of thinking about this. Now, going forward, let us look at a little more deeper into the business perspectives. There is a common myth that when, you invest into sustainability, there is a cost involved. There is a, typically 10 years back or 15 years back, many organizations used to consider sustainability or investment into the environment as a cost center, but it has changed rapidly. Now there are opportunities that are to be leveraged, and it is the cost of doing ESG or embarking on sustainability journey outweighs the benefits in a big way. And that realization clearly is coming all over the world. And that is what is driving, the competitive advantage of sustainability. So, the cost of inaction is rather so huge that we need to take this path of good ESG governance and good sustainability practices. The stakeholders, we have moved away from what you call shareholder based business functions to stakeholder based business activities. So which means our business's aim is not only just to give profit, but to actually serve the larger stakeholders, the value to the society. And that is where sustainability or ESG comes in. It has been increasingly seen as a driver for the innovation. Creative and out-of-the-box thinking leads to more sustainable and less costly practices. Improving the risk management, which goes beyond without saying that when we and as I told, there is a high risk if we are maintaining status quo. The climate-related risks are increasing. Our cost related to our raw materials and resources are increasing. So we have to be more innovative, and we have to identify those risks and how to mitigate and how to manage those risks. And that is what is called the future proofing of any organization, and that ensures the long-term survival of an organization or the business continuity of an organization. So the integration of sustainability across business functions is something what is kind of happening today. I think globally the landscape is emerging in a way that the global ESG risk landscape, well, we will see in a slide subsequently, that how the perception of the climate and environment related risks are increasing all over the world, and the perception is increasing, and this kind of risk is damaging companies perception, companies intangible value. And today any organizations, the intangible value is largely dependent on how the ESG risks are being managed. And investors and the capital providers are today increasingly interested to see how an organization is making the organization future proof, how it is kind of reporting on ESG related performance, how it is considering those actions which will be related to the management of environment related risk or sustainability related risk. And the disclosure is therefore becoming very, very important. In many countries, ESG related disclosure is kind of mandatory from the stock exchanges, because the investors' value needs to be retained. You have to basically investors need to know what kind of actions the organization is taking, not only to manage the current risk but also the future one. And the operational efficiency, as you all know, that when we are talking about managing energy, managing the resources, our operational efficiency increases, and that actually leads to a lot of cost saving in a larger way for any organization. So that is why the investors today, be it stock exchanges, be it the private equity investors, everybody is interested to see, and that has become one of the major parameter and criteria when investors are coming in to invest into any company or any business. So what happens when any company starts the journey? This is a typical journey as we have experienced. This is not specific to any particular sector or any particular country or a region, but generally this is something what we observe. So the first step, of course, is usually the how you are managing your compliance, how your initiatives are taken that meets the regulation, the law of the land, and so on and so forth. And then as organizations get onto the maturity level, they get into the intermediate level. For example, they are talking of, what are the material topics, because there are so many sustainability issues. And depending on the organization's operation, depending on the organization's geography, what is material ESG issues for the organization, it is important to understand. And then only you are able to take the action in the right direction on the right topics. We have one future session which is dedicated completely to materiality and how it is determined and what are the kind of imperatives around it. But broadly, once, unless and until you identify what are those top material issues on which an organization works, there are, say, hundreds of sustainability topics or ESG topics, each may not be important for all the organizations. And then how you identify your actions that will be aligned to the geography where you operate, to the achievement of the sustainable development goals of the country or a region. So that is also important. So that helps you in determining the areas where we should focus. Then a mature organization, gets into a next level of, doing this materiality aspect regularly, benchmarking with respect to some of the peers and other organizations, some of the leaders, and things like climate risk assessment, climate risk related reporting, assessing financial implication of the climate risk, what are the opportunities out of the risks. So all these kind of things, then that this is a matured organization gets into those areas. And then finally an advanced organization where you are started leveraging the strategic benefit out of ESG implementation, embedding sustainability in all aspects of business, moving from mitigating risk to taking advantage of the opportunities, and leveraging on that all those benefits that a company can actually leverage. So that is how the maturity path goes for an organization. When you think about your organization, where you are coming from, you can think that where you are and then what kind of actions you require to take in the next step to get into the next higher level. That is what is all required to be thought through and accordingly acted on. So here you see on this particular slide, or a few, business value creation levers. What are the kind of strong ESG proposition and what are the kind of makes your ESG proposition weak? Expanding on, say, if you are in any organization, for any organization, growth is actually very important, and green growth opportunities, green growth market, how we are tapping that, and shrinking into old energy customer base. Today, for example, there are newer areas like, for example, green hydrogen. We are talking about renewable energy and all these areas, whether we are leveraging on those opportunities that is offered in the green growth market. How are we assessing and addressing the cost reduction aspect? How are we making our businesses more attractive to the investors? That is something important, and that depends on how profitable we are going to make the organization, and that in turn depends on how internal efficiency can be increased. For example, reduced energy cost, reduced waste, optimum utilization of material, so reducing the waste footprint, and so on and so forth. Skill is very important. Nowadays, the whole world is dependent on leveraging on skill. And a ESG compliant organization, or an organization which is sustainable organization, attracts talent. Today's youth are very, very conscious. They think about before joining any organization, how it is the ESG or sustainability quotient of the organization. You may recall that few years back, there was a whole upsurge in the organization Amazon in the US, where they wanted Amazon to take more proactive measures on sustainability and ESG, and that is happening all over the world. And the regulatory requirements, regulatory requirements are changing with respect to ESG. How you are responding, how we are being able to respond to the new requirements, new legislations related to such. For example, in Europe, today there is a new rule that any imports happening to Europe from any other country has to have, good carbon footprint record of the product, right? Right at the moment, it is limited to 6 or 7 defined product like cement, steel, and things like that. But gradually, more and more such requirements going to come in import restrictions happening on and the non-tariff barriers for import and all that. So these kind of regulatory requirements are happening so rapidly, and in the later part of the presentation, my colleague Pratik will talk about some of those legislations that are happening and how those are being addressed and making our ESG proposition strong. That is all what it's all about. There are 3 very important value creation drivers, which is recognized all over the world, irrespective of industry segment, irrespective of the location of the company. Strengthening the stakeholder appreciation, because stakeholders today, the public awareness, not only your regulators or your investors, but general public's awareness on sustainability, and the companies are being scrutinized every day today, and the companies organizations are required to demonstrate clear corporate responsibility action to sustaining the values. This is all over the world, and this is increasing every day. And how productivity can be increased, cost can be reduced, economic benefit can be obtained through resource efficiency, waste management, circularity. Circularity is another topic, how we are going to have management of our waste to circular economy. And third part is the attracting talent of tomorrow, what we already discussed. The today's younger generation are very, very particular about where they are going to work, whether the organization has a sustainability outlook and are compliant and practicing ESG and such kind of things. On the right-hand side, you see some of the key indicators or statistics, what comes out. 80% of the studies indicated that stock price and is very, very directly related to ESG performance of a company. 90% of the respondents from the studies say that cost of capital indicated that sound sustainability standards lower the cost of capital for the companies, and better operational performance of the firms through sustainability, that is well appreciated and understood. Now look at the key internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders of an organization. Within the internal stakeholders, the board today typically sets the ESG goals, oversee the implementation, ensure the transparency, and the employees, their expectation from the organization increases. They develop the policies, allocate resources, monitor performance related to ESG, and at the worker level, obviously, follow the guidelines, ESG guidelines, and contribute to ESG related discussions. We have seen in many organizations, a lot of suggestions related to ESG and sustainability. Resource efficiency comes from the shop floor, from the people who are at the very, very working level. And those suggestions eventually make a huge difference in operation of the organization. And the external stakeholders and the investors we have already discussed, they encourage, they are encouraging like ever before to take organizations invest into sustainability. The suppliers, today, for example, I think we all recognize that what is happening within the boundary of the organization is important, but at the same time, what is happening outside the boundary in the value chain, how we are able to kind of influence our suppliers to also align to sustainability? How, and in the other side, in our delivery chain, for example, our products, how they are performing in terms of environment, in terms of sustainability, in terms of ESG, and again, end of life of the product, and all these kind of things are kind of becoming important. Customers today are expecting the organizations to remain sustainable. The product should be sustainable. Product should have minimal environmental impacts, and so on and so forth. And the communities, particularly applicable for organizations which has got a large footprint in remote areas, say mining and manufacturing of large goods, how it is in the communities are actually reaping the benefit of the organizations in a value creation, and of course regulators. So some of the best practices what we are seeing today, again, without limiting to any particular geography or any particular type of industry or industry sector, reform into the business practices which embraces sustainability and ESG, embracing to circular business model, using scenario analysis to understand ESG related risk and opportunities, and leveraging on that. So that is something becoming a top priority for many organizations. Engage with stakeholders, particularly consumers, to derive what the consumers want and the customers want, and define your product and services based on the expectation from the customers and consumers. And third, the collaboration with the government, because what is happening is governments are setting the policy. And there, the more you are able to engage with the government, you will have policies and frameworks which will be easier for you to, kind of adopt sustainable practices and policies. And there, actually, industry collaboration is also becoming very, very important, because today the circular economy aspect, if you see, one industry can use waste product of other industry for manufacturing of the goods in a more effective manner, and so on and so forth. So that is where, the collaboration with government, how the national level policies or the international policies can frame up and help sustainability. There is a lot to happen, collaboration to happen between, industry and the government. And the integrating sustainability business, what you see on the right, it is all business functions has its own role to play. Gone are the days when sustainability used to be one department which used to take care of, say, for example, tree plantation in a company, or energy efficiency or energy consumption reduction. Gone are those days, because now every business function needs to very proactively work on how it can come up to the level of today, where all these demands of the increasing ESG in the business operations are required, and innovation, which is actually leading the way all through. Sorry. Yeah. So there are 4 quadrants if you look at the ESG related risks in the business. One is the very prominent one is, for example, the climate related risk, which is stemming from the shift towards it, and the solutions which are coming through the shift towards a low carbon economy. And we have several climate related regulations across the world. So the operations of any organization is kind of guided by those changes which are happening. Those decarbonization initiatives, those are very imperative for getting for future business operations. So that is one of the major area. Regulatory risk, we already talked about the regulations which are coming in that are posing restrictions in many ways for different kinds of business operations and business outlook. Supply chain related risk, again, we discussed a bit that, say raw material related issues. Many industry are dependent on agro products as their raw material. So if we are talking of the food and beverage industry and so on. And for example, because of climate change and different other criteria and geopolitical situations, the supply chain related risks are increasingly becoming very, very prominent. And fourth, what you call the reputational risk, and we have seen umpteen examples how companies which have been very profitable in the past and has actually, due to ESG issues, we have got this Union Carbide incident in India. We have got this ExxonMobil incident of oil spill, which has clearly, created huge reputation risk for organization where, environmental and ESG related actions has not been taken at the right time in the right manner. So for any organization, the identifying these potential risk across these quadrants, prioritizing these risks and informed decision making, that will actually help in enhancing the resilience and protecting the reputation. So that is what is important. And many organizations today, as you know, we used to have this, what you call enterprise risk management. And in this enterprise risk management of an organization, we earlier never used to see the environmental risk or climate related risk or sustainability risk. Now, most of the organizations are actually kind of incorporating those risks into the enterprise risk universe of their and managing this risk through the enterprise risk management process. So this is a summary snapshot. Sorry. This one is a snapshot from, World Economic Forum has been publishing what we call the Global Risk Report for many, many years. And if you see that, this is a depiction from 2018 till this year, the top 5 global risks in terms of, impact on business. If you see, the green ones are related to the environmental one. How, the top risks are including environment-related risks. 2024, for example, if you can see extreme weather events, critical change to earth systems, biodiversity-related biodiversity lost. Sorry, I think how the screen moved, I don't know. Meha, I am not able to. It is worked. There is a bit of a lag, it seems. Yeah. So you can see the 4 out of 5 top risks today are related to environment or climate change, right? So this clearly indicates the importance of why the climate related or environment related or the ESG related risks requires to be managed by any organization, and these are going to be, increasingly more important in the years to come. We talked about, I think there is a bit of lag while I am trying to move the slides. Let us just wait to get back to the previous slide. Sorry for this, folks. Meha, I am giving up the remote control. There seems to be some problem at my end. Would you just please move the slide to the previous one?
Yes, let me just do that.
Yes, I don't know, there's some problem. I'm not able to move. Yeah, thank you so much. So we talked about, the sustainable supply chain and the significance of it in the area of sustainability and ESG. And what is happening is, as I mentioned, that what is happening within the boundary of the organization is important, and what kind of actions we are taking within the boundary of the organization and how it is ESG compliant is important. But at the same time, for most of the organizations, what happens is there is a huge supply chain where the raw materials are coming from, or different other services are coming from. And even if you look at the other side of the chain, which is the delivery, when say a product is going out, the logistics, the how it is reaching to the customers, when the product is getting used at customers end, what are the environmental or sustainability related implications? These are actually so important today. A car manufacturing company may actually manufacture the cars in a very sustainable way. But what about the raw material, the steel that is coming, the aluminum that is coming, whether the suppliers of those materials are adopting sustainable practices and procedures? A classic example is, for example, we are talking of electric vehicle, EVs in a big way. But there are challenges in, say, electric battery, which is the major component of EV. What is the sustainability implication of a battery? The lithium, we all know that it takes a huge amount of resources, water, earth moving for manufacture of lithium. So I think as a solution, electric vehicle could be a very sustainable solution for the future. But in the supply chain, whether we are talking about that kind of sustainability. So it has to be kind of assessed in a more holistic way. What we talk about, cradle to grave approach means that it is not only the gate to gate of the organization or a factory which is manufacturing some product, but the entire life cycle of the product, from cradle to grave, from the raw materials to when the product is kind of getting it's getting into its end of life. What is the sustainability imperative across that? And that is why United Nations Global Compact, UNGC, has come up with a framework which it encourages to follow, which is committing, assessing, defining, implementing, measuring, communicating, which is a typical cycle. Those who are familiar with ISO related cycles, it is something similar. So that's a broader framework. But then this analysis of details, implications of the supply chain, of the value chain, is something is becoming increasingly important, and that is one of the top things which organizations are kind of thinking today. Next one, Mehak, please. Yeah, here are some examples where some of these you might have already noticed. This comes in the newspapers, this comes in the media. How reputation risk, for example, has become very important for, say, Nike, who had kind of the poor working condition at Nike contractors factory. How it has created a major news, and it kind of tarnishes the reputation of Nike. Marks and Spencer, Uniqlo, again, issues related to in the supply chain, actually, where we are talking about children being used for manufacturing and long work hours, 60 hours a week and things like that. These kind of newses create immensely tarnishing reputation. And Apple's, again, in China plant accidents and labor related issues, deaths due to EHS issue or the working condition issue. These have been, come into light, and it tarnishes the reputation of the organization tremendously. And once that happens, recovering from that becomes very, very difficult, as we all know. We have all our experiences. So many of you are actually from industry, so you know how this kind of things happen. Next one, please. I think this title, many of us are familiar, greenwashing. And greenwashing, some of the examples are very prominent. British Petroleum, which rebranded itself as Beyond Petroleum in the last decade. And actually, that was a good campaign to start with. But at the same time, when stakeholders kind of probed into it, they found that 96% of BP's annual spending or investment was still into into non-renewables or oil and gas. So that kind of fell flat. The Beyond Petroleum campaign was kind of stopped after that, after some time. The Volkswagen example was got the limelight for a few years back, and it was related to the emission manipulation device, which was recording the emission from the vehicle. There was certain software and hardware that actually kept misleading information. We all know about that, and there was a lawsuit. There was US Environmental Agency, US EPA came down heavily on it, and eventually, of course, that it was for Volkswagen had to do a lot of countermeasures actually to come out of that problems that happened. Similarly, H&M, conscious clothing campaign, but then there were a lot of controversy about their claim of organic cotton and recycled cotton and all those initiatives that they were they were accused of being misleading the customers by making all those kind of stuff. So I think today in Europe also there is a lot of talk about how this greenwashing, there is a law coming recently have come in to prevent greenwashing and the kind of misleading labels or kind of things. So I think this is something we need to be very conscious about, and organization needs to be very, very careful about how the campaigns are driven, what kind of claims are kind of done. If these are not substantiated through proper research or proper data or information, then it can actually backfire, and that is happening, and that has tarnished reputation of many companies in the past, and that is becoming an increasing concern all over the world. Next, move over, please. Yeah, I think now I would like to hand over to my colleague Pratik. Pratik, would you like to come in and kind of take us through some of the aspects of the ESG frameworks and the development, how it happened? And of course, then we have some case studies at the end.
Right. Thank you so much, Dipankar. And I would like to thank Zahir for setting the context wonderfully, and Dipankar for taking us through the journey of how ESG has evolved over the years and how companies and businesses are now effectively integrating ESG into its day-to-day operations. In this section of the presentation, we will delve a little bit deeper into the various ESG-related frameworks that some of you may be familiar with, some that you may not be familiar with. And this is a critical part because in a later session, especially when we talk about materiality and the session on reporting and disclosures, we will be talking about some of the reporting frameworks in far greater detail. Today, it is more of an overview. If we see the benefits of ESG frameworks, obviously the benefits are manifold, and it cuts across environment, social, and governance. Under environment, there are a number of critical issues that these frameworks cover: conserving and the use of energy and materials more efficiently, reducing waste and discharges, recycling to the extent possible, converting organic waste into fuel or energy to maximize sustainability and cost savings for businesses. Under the social aspect, we look at things like clear and transparent human resource policies and procedures, anticipation and avoidance of labor-related problems, effective occupational health and safety management. And under governance, there are aspects like robust policies and procedures, ethics and transparency, and ESG integration into risk, and finally, resilience to corruption and instability. Now, what are some of the advantages of adopting ESG frameworks? Well, of course, business continuity. This, I think, is foremost on everybody's minds nowadays. Cost reductions through ESG strategies. This is, again, something that Dipankar elaborated on extensively. Reduce regulatory and legal interventions. For a long time, the adoption of ESG frameworks around the world was voluntary in nature. But as we will see in the subsequent slides, that there is an increasing movement around the world to formalize these and make them regulations. And so they're no longer going to be voluntary. And companies that have been voluntarily adopting these frameworks for several years naturally have a clear advantage over the ones who will be reacting to the regulations. Employee productivity output uplift is another critical benefit of adopting ESG frameworks, and of course, investment and asset optimization. Neha, next slide, please. So this is a broad timeline of various sustainability and ESG frameworks that you see around the world. Starting with the Global Reporting Initiative, which began in 1997 as part of a global push to develop non-financial reporting standards similar to your IFRS and GAAP for financial reporting. And this culminated in the creation of GRI and the issuance of the first generation of GRI reporting standards. GRI, of course, has evolved tremendously over the years and has gone through multiple rounds of iterations, and from a framework is now a standard. If we look at 2000, again, a lot of important new frameworks were introduced into the market. The Equator Principles, which are critical to financial institutions. The IFRS, the Global Financial Reporting Body and Authority, started adopting non-financial reporting principles. The Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, also began in 2000. And so was the creation of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is globally the most accepted protocol for calculating your GHG footprint. Moving to 2005, we have the Principles of Responsible Investment, PRI, which again is extremely critical today to financial institutions reporting on their ESG-related investments and their ESG-related activities. In 2010, we see the creation of the Climate Disclosures Standards Board, CDSB. We see the introduction of the ISO 26000 standard on social responsibility. We see the creation of the Integrated Reporting Framework under the IIRC, or the International Integrated Reporting Council, which was an offshoot of the Prince of Wales Foundation initiative chaired by Justice King from South Africa. In 2011, the SASB standard was developed and adopted. This was primarily more so for companies that were listed in the United States of America, whereas GRI was something that was globally applicable. The adoption of SASB till very recently was limited primarily to the North American market. In 2014, the EU NFRD was introduced. Then we had TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which was, of course, an initiative led by Michael Bloomberg that encouraged companies to assess their climate-related risks and disclose them in an appropriate manner. In 2016, we had the adoption of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which were championed by the UN and was part of the historic Paris Agreement. Then we had the World Benchmarking Alliance that came up in 2018. The World Economic Forum, which has for several years been focusing on sustainability and have had dedicated sessions at Davos every year on sustainability, has now again re-emphasized its commitment to ESG and sustainability for all its members. In 2021, we see in Kenya the introduction of the National Security Exchange requirements around sustainability reporting. We see GRI, as I mentioned earlier, transforming from a framework into a standard. And we see the introduction of the TNFD, which is similar to TCFD, but it is on nature-related disclosures and not climate-related disclosures. It's more on biodiversity. In 2022, now what has happened is, of course, over the last 25 years, there have been so many independent frameworks and standards that have been developed. There was a need for some sort of consolidation because it was leading to a lot of confusion in the market. Investors, businesses, stakeholders are not really sure which ones to use, which ones to deploy, how to deploy them, how to interlink them. And this was creating a lot of confusion. So in 2022, IFRS, along with GRI, TCFD, the Value Reporting Foundation, which was earlier known as IIRC, and CDSB decided to jointly come together and create a consolidated set of reporting frameworks. And this culminated, of course, on the 1st of January 2024, when IFRS officially released IFRS S1 and IFRS S2, which we will talk about in a little bit more further detail in our subsequent slide, which have now laid the foundation for a global framework for non-financial reporting. And this, of course, is also linked with the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which directs EU companies to report their ESG performance as per the new IFRS S1 and S2 standards. Neha, next slide, please. Yes. So as I was mentioning earlier, and as Dipankar had mentioned also, we are seeing an increasing regulatory push towards getting companies, especially companies registered on stock exchanges, to disclose their ESG-related performance in a systematic and periodic manner. Starting from the North America, SEC announced a proposal for climate-related disclosures by public companies. This is something that is under development and should be coming out soon. In Europe, mandatory TCFD reporting by listed companies. In the UK, Green Taxonomy Development, LSE's ESG reporting guidelines. These are all critical developments that have happened in Europe. Then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, CSRD in the EU, the EU Green Taxonomy Regulation. This is another key development. If you look at Africa, I've already mentioned the Nairobi Stock Exchange reporting guidelines. Then there's also the Capital Markets Authority framework. And coming to India, we have, of course, have our Securities and Exchange Board, who have made business responsibility and sustainability reporting mandatory from the fiscal year 22-23. And this has been progressively going to ramp up to include the top 1,000 companies. It already includes the top 1,000. Now it was progressively ramped up over the past few years to the point where now all the top 1,000 listed entities in India now have to mandatorily publish their business report and sustainability report. Neha, next slide. So we wanted to delve a little deeper into some of the region-specific ESG frameworks applicable to East Africa. I've already mentioned the Nairobi Securities Exchange ESG reporting, under which an ESG disclosure manual has been developed to guide listed companies in Kenya on ESG reporting. The manual outlines that ESG reporting should be done on the basis of materiality. The Capital Markets Authority, again in Kenya, published the Code of Corporate Governance Practices for Issuers of Securities to the public in 2015. It requires listed companies to explain in their annual reports how they have applied the recommendations contained in the code. The UN Global Compact, more than 200 organizations in Kenya are participants of the Global Compact Network Kenya, which is the local arm of the UNGC, that has developed a set of 10 principles that organizations can voluntarily adopt and integrate into their own strategies and operations. And then finally, investor groups. Institutional investors often require organizations to implement environmental and social management systems. Dipankar spoke at length about this. If we look at the box on the right-hand side, what we see currently, only 1 in 4 companies that are listed on the Nairobi Stock Exchange are currently compliant with the ESG reporting frameworks. So there is a lot of space for growth here. 15 out of the 61 publicly traded firms in Kenya have adopted ESG disclosures following the release of the guidelines. Neha, next slide, please. Now, stepping a little into the step-by-step integration of ESG into business. This is something Dipankar did touch upon when he was speaking. But here the source that we are using is the Nairobi Stock Exchange report. This is their guidance. So for companies that are registered or operating out of Kenya, this may be a specific use to you. So as a step 1, understand the ESG context and set ESG target objectives of the company. Governance over ESG integration and reporting. That is a very, very critical aspect of the first step. Step 2, identification of sustainability material aspects aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and the NVGs, building capacity of key personnel on sustainability-related issues and conduct stakeholder engagement, establish key performance indicators and metrics to track progress on ESG goals and targets, periodic materiality analysis, value creation, and benchmarking study to better understand current situation and companies' preparedness for transition to newer developments. This is very critical. Materiality is something that is not a one-time activity. Companies generally, as a best practice, revisit their materiality exercise on every 2 years. Typically, this is done so because both the business and the ESG landscape is rapidly evolving. It is very, very dynamic, and your material topics could change very quickly. So doing this on a periodic basis is very, very critical. Step 5 would include the content development through regular ESG disclosures and embedding sustainability in all aspects of business. This was again something that Dipankar touched upon. ESG is no longer a silo. It has to be a part and parcel of every single function of the organization. Otherwise, the integration of ESG is simply not possible. And finally, the independent third-party assurance of ESG disclosures to build the credibility of the disclosures is very, very important, especially for companies looking to build stakeholder confidence, attract investors. The importance of third-party assurance cannot be stressed enough. We can move to the next slide. What you see on your screen are the details of some of the major ESG-related frameworks around the world. I've already talked extensively about GRI. What is important to notice about GRI is that GRI is meant for a broad set of stakeholders. It can be used and applied by pretty much any organization in the world, irrespective of sector, geography, scale, or any such parameters. It can be applied very easily. It gives you a step-by-step approach on how to conduct materiality, how to select KPIs, and how to disclose information. EFRAG is another very important framework, more restricted to the European region, but also catching on globally. It is more focused on regulators, policymakers, and investors. It focuses on 2 aspects of materiality: impact materiality, topics that significantly affect the reporting entity's operations and value chain based on severity, likelihood of negative impacts, scale, scope, and likelihood of the positive impact. Financial materiality, topics that financially impact reporting entity. Now, this is critical. GRI last year adopted a practice of double materiality. Prior to that, it was a single materiality concept where companies would only map material topics in relation to its importance to itself and to its stakeholders. But now we have to also look at the financial impact of materiality. So this is a new dimension that has been added to this process. IFRS S1, as I mentioned, is a new global reporting standard which gives a framework for any company to report on its sustainability performance. IFRS S2 is what was earlier called TCFD. Under this, all climate-related disclosures and guidances are provided. SASB, as I mentioned, is a similar reporting framework to GRI, though of course not as broad and not as broadly applied. It is more limited to the North American market, but gradually catching on globally. CSRD is the European requirement on reporting, which is linked to both IFRS S1 and S2. CDP is a platform for disclosing your climate change performance, your performance on water, and your performance on biodiversity. And of course, the IIRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council, provides the guidelines for preparing and disclosing your performance in an integrated report. We can move on, Miha. So this is the GRI standard. This is a standard that we will delve into much more deeply in a subsequent session on reporting and disclosures. But just for your quick knowledge, like I mentioned before, the GRI is extremely comprehensive and includes universal standards, sector standards, and topic-specific standards. So far, it has released 4 sector-specific standards: oil and gas, coal, agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing and mining. Several more are currently under development and should be released very, very soon. This year, they've also added a new topic-specific standard, GRI 101, on biodiversity. And one thing that when talking about reporting, when it comes to GRI reports, earlier when it was still a framework, companies could report it without informing GRI, and it wasn't really much of an issue. But now, since it's a standard, informing GRI is mandatory, and reports can be prepared in 2 ways, either in accordance with GRI or with reference to GRI. In accordance has much more stringent requirements attached to it, whereas with reference has slightly less stringent requirements. What these requirements are, we will get into the subsequent session on reporting and disclosures. We can now move on to the section on some of the key studies that we've identified of leading practices around the world, as well as in East Africa. So starting with Schneider Electric, which is the global giant when it comes to automation and electricity solutions. They began their journey several years ago. If you see some of their highlights from their 2020 performance, Schneider's sustainability impact score of 4.91 out of 10 improved its performance from the previous year. 45% of its packaging is sustainable. They managed to save over 440 million tons of CO2 for their customers, and they've provided access to green electricity to 40 million plus people. Now, if you look at climate they have a program called Climate SSI #1, which is to grow, and the objective of this is to grow the Schneider impact revenues by 80% by focusing on technologies that actually reduce electricity and energy consumption. And you can see some of the targets, KPIs, and goals that they have set for themselves. Very ambitious, and very aggressive. And these are some of the targets that we are kind of seeing now from leading companies. We can move to the next case study, please. So this is Unilever. Unilever, of course, has been a global leader in sustainability for several years, spearheaded by their visionary chairman, Mr. Paul Polman, almost 35 years ago. And since then, they've kept up their activities, and they're extremely advanced. So if you look at some of the sustainability targets that they've adopted, 100% absolute reduction in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 2015, 42% absolute reduction in Scope 3 and energy and industrial GHG emissions by 2021, 30.3% absolute reduction in Scope 3 forest, land, and agricultural GHG emissions by 2021. So these are all targets that they have hit, and now they have committed to achieving net zero by 2039 across their entire value chain. And on the right-hand side, you see some of the key action areas: scaling up their supplier climate program, reformulating products to use lower GHG ingredients, sustaining and scaling their approach to forest risk commodities, scaling up their regenerative agriculture and lower carbon dairy, reducing the GHG intensity of key chemical ingredients, redesigning packaging for recycling, reducing GHG emissions, improving logistics networks, investing in more energy efficient ice cream cabinets, developing alternative aerosol propellants for the US market. We can move to the next slide. This is Cargill, the global food giant. Of course, as a global food giant, climate change is at the top of their priority. Climate change is playing a big role in altering their supply chains when it comes to the procurement of food and grains and cereals and multiple other commodities. Therefore, they have an extensive climate action plan with concrete targets and progress that they have been tracking for several years. And the target end date is 2025. So if you look at the reduced absolute operational GHG emissions 10% by 25, they've been progressively going there, and they've already achieved the 2025 target well before hand in 2022 itself, and are now going to set themselves a much stiffer target. Cargill also aims to implement a sustainable aquaculture program with the goal of reducing the carbon footprint of its customers' farm seafood by 30% by 2030. They are also moving food sustainably around the world. They're converting liquid waste into 120,000 metric tons of advanced biodiesel each year to support the decarbonization of their trucking and ocean freight. Cargill also announced the completion of its first state-of-the-art biodiesel plant, which is projected to reduce transportation emissions by an estimated 482,000 metric tons. This reduction is equivalent to removing roughly 90,000 cars on the road for a year. Neha, next slide. This is McDonald's, again a food company, another company whose supply chain is extremely dependent on climate change. So they have an ambitious net zero commitment by 2050. They've identified some of their key risks: mandates on regulation of existing products and services, changes in precipitation patterns and extreme variability, carbon pricing mechanisms, and changes in precipitation patterns and extreme variability in weather patterns. Some of the key takeaways: McDonald's has been proactive in addressing climate change for several years, actively pursuing science-based targets covering scopes 1, 2, and 3. The company is committed to sustainable sourcing goals and has made deforestation commitments among other initiatives. McDonald's also employs scenario modeling to assess transition and physical risks and opportunities across its operations, including supply chains and restaurants. A pledge has been made to achieve net zero by 2050, as I mentioned, with efforts underway to develop a science-based framework to guide target evolution. A cross-functional leadership oversees McDonald's climate change strategy, ensuring engagement from the board of directors to country-level sustainability staff. And they've also identified key opportunities. We can go back, key opportunities such as transition to more efficient, energy-efficient buildings, use of lower emission sources of energy, supporting and advancing suppliers' climate strategies, and accelerating sustainable and regenerative farming. We can move to the next slide. Coming to East Africa, starting with the KCB group, they have also been very proactive in the space of sustainability over the last few years. They have also been publishing the sustainability reports quite periodically. Their key focus areas are on the screen for you. I will not go through them in detail. You can read them, but they have conducted their materiality assessment and identified the material topics under social, environment, and governance. They are also leading the financial services sector in Africa when it comes to transitioning towards net zero. You can see some of the aggressive commitments that they've taken at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. They've adopted 12 of the 17 SDGs. They have updated policies and programs, roles and responsibilities in their enterprise risk management framework. They've taken the net zero commitment and created a strategy around it. They have created a program on responsible consumption and carbon footprint. They've also looked at creating a green portfolio of investments. They're also looking at improving the sustainability of their supply chains. Now, coming to Bamburi Cement, again, depending on the sector, cement being an extremely environmentally intensive sector, cleaning up your environmental footprint is very, very critical for cement companies. And most cement companies globally are driven by the Global Cement and Concrete Sustainability Board, which drives global cement companies towards sustainability initiatives. And Bamburi, being a member, has taken on quite a few aggressive sustainability targets related to climate and energy consumption. That includes adoption of RE. It includes moving to, cleaner mobility options, then looking at sustainable procurement, looking at circular economy. Cement is a very critical sector in the circular economy because a lot of waste from other industries can be used in cement kilns as fuel. So it's a very efficient way to get rid of waste and improve the circularity of any economy. They're also focusing heavily on people and human rights. As a leading clinker and cement and concrete producer in Eastern Africa, Bamburi is at the forefront of innovative and sustainable building solutions with a vision to be undisputed leader and preferred partner providing innovative, high-quality solutions for nation building. This is critical because cement goes into the manufacturing of buildings, and this brings, the concept of embedded emissions to the forefront. A building, there are, like anything, has a life cycle of emissions. So during construction, during operation, and during disposal. So the more sustainable the cement, the more sustainable the building. And you can also see that they have conducted a thorough materiality analysis and published their materiality matrix in their sustainability report, which is there on your screen. We can move to the next one, please. Talking about East Africa breweries. Breweries are again an industry where there is a lot of environmental impact, mainly due to water consumption and energy consumption. So if you see, they're looking at, multiple areas. Like ESG is not focusing only on one area. They're looking at people. They're looking at increasing the number of women in their leadership roles by 50% by 2030. They're looking to be a zero waste organization by 2030. They're looking to be consuming 30% less water by 2030. And they've also taken a net zero carbon target for 2030. And just like KCB and Bamburi, they have also prepared their materiality matrix in detail, and this can be found in the sustainability report. And I think this is finally coming to Safaricom, the largest telecom provider in the East African region. They have again been a company that have been very active in the ESG space for several years. They have they're focused a lot on their carbon footprint, reducing their emissions, reducing their water consumption, collecting and recycling e-waste. And like most successful companies, their activities focus across environment, social, and governance. That's it from us. From the content perspective, I will now hand this back to Miha to moderate the question and answers.
Thank you all so much. Thanks to the attendees for joining us here today, and we promise to bring a lot more in the next few webinars. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists, Zahir Sheikh for the welcome message, Prateek Singh Gupta and Dipankar for a very insightful webinar. Of course, we can all take a lot of things back into our organizations and implement these. Thank you once again. We have a few questions that we can take. So someone in the chat, thank you, Srikant Das, for your question. He's asked, 30 to 40 flights have been diverted in Delhi airport while landing in the last 2 weeks due to bad weather. Does this incident come as an ESG event for an airline industry?
Prateek, would you like to take this? Yeah, your stint in airlines,
Right, absolutely. I think for any airline company, climate change is now becoming a very, very important consideration. The diversion of flights disrupts operations tremendously. It's a huge cost implication. It's a logistical nightmare. It is also a huge loss of reputation. When flights get delayed, diverted, it leads to loss of customer trust. You can lose customers permanently. We used to get a lot of complaints. And so this is definitely something that is topmost on the agenda when it comes to ESG for aviation companies globally.
Thank you, Prateek, for your insights on the airline industry. We have a few more questions. One question is, how do you elevate consumer awareness about ESG, especially those in Africa, to force or motivate companies considering sustainable issues into their business?
Right. Should I take this?
Yeah, go ahead. And then Zahir might have something to add.
Yeah, I think that he will be able to speak to the East African market, but I can speak a little bit to the experiences that we've seen in India and in other countries. I think this is something that will happen. It's already happening aggressively in India. We see this in major cities in India now, where customers want to buy organic food, they want to buy natural medicines, they want to do business with companies that are responsible. Even when I was with an airline company, we had a program where customers could contribute to basically nullifying the emissions from their flight. And it was quite a successful program. So there is definitely an uptick in how much customers are driving businesses towards sustainability.
Absolutely. Pratik, I mean, I agree. And then the other thing is, you see, the challenges, I think, in our environment are slightly different from those experienced globally. So, I mean, one of the other questions was, can we just use the global methodology and then apply it to the East African context? And I think the global methodology provides a good framework, but there are lots of things, in East Africa, which are very particular to our situation. So, for example, in environment, one of the issues is water scarcity. I mean, just access to clean water, it's a critical issue in many East African countries. And then there's also the issue of land degradation, so things like soil erosion and deforestation, these are significant issues. So, I mean, if you're in agriculture, then, how you use your land and how you're doing your business becomes very important. And then, of course, things like climate change impact. Again, this is going to be particularly important because East Africa, we've seen, in the last decade, is particularly vulnerable to climate change because a major part of our economy actually depends on agriculture. Yeah, and this is a big economic sector. So, the moment the climate changes, we've had rains that have failed for many years, like, for example, the famine in Ethiopia. We've had rains which have completely washed away our crops. So these are big things, and obviously, any action taken, to mitigate this is very important for an East African business. And then on the social side, there are things like inequality and poverty, which is much more prevalent, in this part of the world. So if you want social stability, and then you want economic development, you can't do it without ignoring those two things. And then the other thing is also healthcare access. I mean, it's a significant challenge in East Africa. And then accessing healthcare is a major problem. And then also the other problem is, that the rate of diseases is also much higher in this part of the world, perhaps because of the healthy climate and so on and so forth. So those are significant challenges. And then there's also on the social side, there's also the economic, the educational disparities. There's huge disparity in terms of access to quality education, which can be limited, and it impacts your workforce quality, and it also impacts the economic opportunities that are available to different sectors of your society. And then on the governance side, there are specific challenges. For example, there's political stability is an issue. I mean, in some countries in this region, that's a major issue. And that can obviously impact your investment decisions. It can impact your business operations. It can impact long-term decision-making, in terms of investments and so on and so forth, and upscaling. Another key feature of this region is corruption, unfortunately. High levels of corruption, they affect the businesses, they affect the business environment, and they also affect the regulatory frameworks. And sometimes just the ease of doing business is adversely affected by this. So yeah, and then maybe just a question of regulation as well. The regulation in this part of the world is perhaps not as advanced. We're always playing catch up to the developed countries. So this is another area that we need to look at. So companies operating in East Africa have to be more nimble. I think they have to be more agile, and they have to be more responsive to the local situation.
And I think just to add on to that, I think there's a question of, whether this is something that is only applicable to international businesses, etc. Certainly not. East Africa and India have had similar experiences. We are both post-colonial regions. We've suffered from some of the same issues, poverty, some of the issues that Zahir raised, poverty, corruption. we are not strangers to these issues as well. And I think there is a lot of opportunity for the global South to learn from each other. Instead of relying on the global North to show us the way, let us show them the way. I think that should be the attitude and the mindset.
Yeah.
I think if I may add with respect to a little bit about how consumers are kind of affecting organizations' behavior. There was a very prominent thing that happened in this part of the world and many other countries as well, which is related to, standards and labeling of equipment. For example, there were the household equipment, there has been rating like 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, depending on their energy efficiency and environmental performance. And there has been a tremendous response from the market, from the consumers to buy appliances which say air conditioners, energy efficient air conditioners, energy efficient fans, energy efficient washing machines. Even if the cost is a little higher, the consumers are actually opting. We have seen that the market trend is consumers are actually opting for higher rated, the 5-star rated appliances, which actually over the life cycle, the initial cost may be a little high, but over the life cycle, the customers are saving on electricity consumption, customers are saving on maintenance requirements, and so on and so forth. So the life cycle cost is something very much visible, and today's customers are responding to that. Customers are very aware today, and that's what we are seeing, how these customers are, guiding organizations to come up with innovation in product, come up with upgraded products, and so on and so forth.
We saw the case study on Schneider. That's a perfect example of that.
Yes, thank you all for your expertise in answering this question. There's one more question. I hope there's some time. I see a few people, well, a lot of people still in this webinar, so we can probably answer this last question. Other than ethical issues, what could motivate African businesses to invest in ESG? Is ESG and sustainable business any issue only to international companies in the developed world trading across border?
Maybe if I can start. Sorry. If I can start, and then of course Zahir can add with the local context. And I think one is, the thing I always emphasize is the business value. One is the regulations and all that, but the business value from ESG is clearly today. It is actually creating an organization future-proof, making it business continuity permanent, and so on and so forth. And cross-border regulations, we are seeing that, if today's organizations are very global, you have got footprint in various countries, product of one organization from one country goes to the other country. And therefore, kind of complying to inter-country regulations on sustainability is increasingly coming. We have seen some of the examples on the slides. So I think these are one of the major drivers. One is the cross-border ESG-related regulations, non-tariff barriers, and second, the business value you achieve from sustainability. Over to Zahir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree, Dipankar. There's more and more drive now for all of the businesses, to become ESG aware, to become more inclusive, and to adapt their production processes, their recruitment processes, their entire strategy, their expansion strategy, all of that in line with, and you can see a lot of circular, now production cycles where the waste is going straight back in there and they're using it. And you can see it, when you walk in the supermarket, you can see businesses are actively using this as a competitive lever. It's no longer a question of whether this should be done or not. Now the businesses that are at the forefront are using this for competitive advantage. And I think the African market is very aware and very awake to this particular change. We can see it if you go up country, you can see, the effects of deforestation. You can see the effects of, improper use of land, for example. It's very, very apparent. It's affected not just large companies, but the small farmer as well. So everybody has understood the effect. We've all seen the weather changes. We've seen the weather patterns. So I think generally speaking, the common man on the street realizes, these are not things which, shall we do it or shall we not do it? And I think businesses that are responsible, that are at the forefront, are taking the lead on this. And, if people don't follow, then they will very quickly fall out, from the competitive market.
Okay, thank you so much. If no one wants to add anything to that, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all again. Once again, thank the panelists for your expertise. It was a very successful webinar, and a lot of people are looking forward to the next few webinars. And from the chat, I see a lot of people very happy about this presentation's outcome. So thank you all, and hope to see you all next month for this webinar. And if any of the panelists would like to say any closing remarks, please go ahead and we will end this webinar.
No, that's it from my side, Meha. Thank you. And thank you, Dipankar, and thank you, Prateek.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
everyone for joining.
All right then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.